Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we kick this off, I do want to point out to the audience that we are taking questions in the Q&A section. Please put your questions in there, time permitting. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can after today's conversation. So what I would like to do now is turn this over to Stephen Saltstein, Forest Family Office's CEO.
Thank you, Callie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. I want to apologize. Our planned moderator, Harvey Briggs, who is the editor-in-chief of Rides and Drives, he had a medical emergency in the family, and so I'm filling in last minute. And so I think what you could expect from that is I'm not as sophisticated as he is on the auto industry. But hopefully, you'll get the benefit of my 30 years as a generalist on Wall Street and how that applies to the electric vehicle market. And, with that said, from a layman's perspective, and Greg, I'm going to ask you about this, but it is such interesting times in the electric vehicle industry. And once again, I'm a fill-in moderator, but I would, you could look at China and you maybe could characterize what they're doing or what they attempted to do as dumping, right? And you could look at what the US did to defend that market is incredibly interesting, what the administration did. There have been some very high profile strategic investments recently in the industry, which are fascinating, as well as some very high profile bankruptcies. And I think what you're also seeing in this market is kind of a divergence between those that are going after the consumer market, be it Tesla, the Ford F-150, et cetera, and then those that are going after the light-duty commercial market. I think a lot of people are coming to the realization right now that the light-duty commercial market is perfect for corporations. It's perfect for government agencies in the sense of depot charging, in the sense that, typically a truck from the post office isn't really going to drive more than 100 miles a day, or a Walmart delivery van isn't really going to drive more than 200 miles a day. And so it seems like they're coming to the realization that, having electric fleets is the perfect solution. So with that said, Greg, it is our great pleasure to have you. Greg Ethridge, CFO of Canoo. Do you mind just introducing yourself and then talking about the company for a few minutes, telling us about the company?
Yeah, Stephen, thanks. And I'll introduce myself, Greg Ethridge. I joined as the CFO a year ago, I guess coming up on a year in August. And I've been on the board since 2020 when Canoo went public through a SPAC merger. And somewhat of you, on the advisory side, Wall Street for a number of years, when in banking, and then ultimately went to private equity. Spent about 10 years of my career on the investing side of the business, turning around businesses in many respects, and then found my way into the Hennessy sponsor that ended up partnering with Canoo and taking it public. So I have the history of Canoo since that time, and it's obviously gone through a lot of evolution. Really exciting, John. Okay. But really exciting to have been part of that evolution. So I think, sorry, we may have had some technical difficulties or something going on in the room. Not quite sure.
You sound perfect, so keep going.
So maybe one of the speakers wasn't working or something. So I've got with me Will Vetter. I'd like maybe Will, you can introduce yourself. And yeah, by way of background, I'm not sure everybody on the call has been on multiple. We've had a series of these, Stephen, with you and Force Family. So thank you for that. We started these last December. So we've had Nitin, our CIO or CTO, on with us once, and then obviously Tony, our CEO, was on with us in March, and this time we have Will Vetter on. So maybe Will, you can introduce yourself and your background. And
thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Will Vetter, and I'm the Director of Product Management and Government Sales here at Canoo. I joined Canoo about 2.5 years ago, but I've been in the automotive industry my entire life. I started off life as actually a master technician and worked in the engineering departments of Land Rover North America and also Mercedes-Benz North America, and then crossed the aisle from the engineering side into the product management side, where I was responsible for Mercedes-AMG as a model line, Mercedes-Maybach, SLR McLaren, And they did that for about a decade, managing products out in the marketplace. Spent some time with BMW Group as well, helping them with their electrification plans and the rollout of electric vehicles. And then did about 3 years with Rolls-Royce, managing their product here in the North America and South American markets. And then came over here to Canoo, and it's definitely a different world for sure, but it's really, really inspiring.
Yeah, I think it's just a good example. And one of the reasons I wanted Will to participate here is we're going to spend some time, obviously, talking about our pipeline, our government experience, our U.S. Postal Service experience. He's got on the ground knowledge of all of that around the product, the feedback, et cetera. So I think that's important to share. But also I think it shows a mix of as an earlier stage EV technology company, as we say, TEM, technology equipment manufacturer, not OEM, because we think about the hardware and the software together. And we have a really good mix of technologists and software experts, as well as more traditional automotive experts. And I think that harmonization across our business is extremely important.
And to add to that, most of the folks here are development engineers and technology-based folks, and they look at things in an entirely different way than traditional OEM would. And some of the things that they bring forth from a product perspective are not things that would have shown up in a traditional OEM at all. And so having that, perfect example. Just from the architecture of the vehicle, from an electrical architecture perspective. We're a clean sheet company. We started off with no design, and we wanted to design the best electric car only to be an electric car. So the kind of the sins that the other OEMs fall into is that they have to get 10 different vendors together and get 10 different ECUs and stitch them together and hope they all talk nicely. And there's waste in that, and there's also lack of control. Whereas with us, we did all the own electrical architecture, and so therefore we can control anything that we want. Case in point example, we were talking to some folks in the law enforcement world, and they were asking us, well, we obviously put strobes on everything, but could you independently control each of the lights in your vehicles? And the short answer is yes. No one else can do that. And so those little things that when you kind of think about that every single input output has some way of being managed or changed by us, it gives us a lot of flexibility on the platform.
Will, expanding on that, if you look at some of the recent investments in the industry, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of pundits have gotten it wrong. And a lot of these infrastructure investments from one larger company to smaller have a lot to do with software as opposed to hardware. Do you agree with that? What's your thought process there?
Yeah, totally. And one of the things about being a TEM, and Tony really always tries to enforce this, is this democratization of the electric car. Okay, we're not just selling a physical full electric car. You have all the spaces in between. Besides selling skateboards and our technical services, the software is what actually makes the hardware talk. So what you couldn't do in the past was make a suspension system give you feedback based upon its usage wear, but we can do that. And we give a voice to hardware that normally wouldn't have that. And that software layer is what makes the hardware more usable for the human. And that's the piece that kind of stitches it together and gives us that additional advantage.
So I've seen a video of the CEO of Ford talking about the fact that one of the reasons why he hasn't been successful in the electric vehicle industry is he has 150 different disparate software providers, and they don't talk to each other.
No. And this has been a problem in the OEM world from the beginning. So one of the positions I had was doing the off-board computer diagnostics for both Mercedes and Land Rover. So I'm the person who's trying to get the computer to talk to the computers on the car and help you diagnose it either remotely or otherwise. And when you have this disparate world of all of these different control modules that you don't have control over, you can't talk to them. So a module that might control, say, the windows is undiagnosable. And the only way to diagnose is there's a physical technician. Whereas from us, we can do all of that from our room and find out, okay, do we even need to send a physical technician? And those are distinct advantages that they won't have until they clean sheet of paper and start over again.
Yeah, and I think, Stephen, this is one of the things that we've, and obviously the news, I have some thoughts on this, but whether you take GM BrightDrop or you take, the VW Rivian news, I think what you're seeing around the traditional OEMs is, of course, they're going to continue to be players, right? They're going to continue to be players, but they're struggling to get outside the box and really break outside of their existing structure. And as much as they've tried, and they've tried it multiple ways, they're learning that starting basically fresh, right? Without kind of that legacy, those legacy structural items. That is the way to ultimately be successful for all the reasons we're talking about. And that's one of the reasons, even if you step back on Canoo, because we were a blank sheet of paper company, there's really three key pillars around GOEV, our ticker GOEV, is that we wanted to start with a great product that's a minimalist, concept, but maximum functionality. And that starts with our multi-purpose platform, right? So great product and control our IP. That was the starting point. Our vehicles have a very different form factor than the traditional automobile, right? Even when you think about a Tesla, right? Why do you have a frunk, right? That's just because it's always been that way. There's no structural reason to need to have now a storage space in the front of your vehicle, right? In the old days, of course, you need to have your engine up front, right? But now all of that is in the platform. Well, why did we not change, or why did they not think about changing the body?
It's all wasted
Right.
space.
It's wasted space, and it's, the turning radius of a Tesla is not near as good, right, as our MPP1 and our LDV 130s and 190s, and that are all on the exact same platform. So that's number one. Number two is, build demand, build a pipeline of kind of key customers, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that here. Obviously, in our case, right, we've been validated by 4 government entities: NASA, sold to NASA, U.S. military, Department of Defense, and now the U.S. Postal Service. So to me, like, that validates the technology, that validates, our ingenuity, our design, and ultimately those partners are spending money with Canoo, and we want them to spend, of course, a lot more over time. And then, so that's built up our demand on the back of a great product. And then finally, control our own manufacturing, and importantly, ramping up in a judicious way. Because I think it was, Elon Musk recently on the Tesla call, made the comment, something to the effect of, if you're buying the stock just to see units quarter to quarter, you're buying it for the wrong reason. You need to be buying it to back, the IP, the team, the future ecosystem, and where mobility is moving, not where we've been, right? And that to me, I think, resonates, right? It's because, if you're trying to measure any party just kind of quarter to quarter, that's not necessarily the right way to do it. Look at it holistically and think about, where is that company playing? In our case, again, around, commercial fleet and government, not around consumer, right? Where is the biggest piece of the pie on the gross margin piece? We believe it's strongly in the government and commercial side of the business rather than consumer. And in our instance, with the light cargo vans, there's not a lot of competition, if any competition right now. We want to continue to, kind of, keep the lead in that category.
Can we bring it back to the core of Canoo's business? Greg, can you talk a little bit about your commercial foray, the niches that you're focused on, and also, like, what are their requirements?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm like, we get the question. I got the question from a research analyst actually yesterday. Hey, what do you think is going to happen with, some of the government incentives and things with, potentially a change in the White House? And I'm like, look, I think, at the end of the day, put aside the politics, sustainability, et cetera. I think, Stephen, as you started, EVs are a better way of mobility around certain applications. And at the end of the day, our commercial customers and our government customers that are setting up to buy in size and bulk, they get it, right? This is a longer lasting product. It has more flexibility. It can, and it ultimately will operate at a much lower cost, right? On a daily cost. And Will can spend a lot of time talking. You can hear it. You get the direct feedback from customers.
It's not, they look at acquisition cost at the beginning part. And remember, there used to be this disparate gap between the price of an EV and the outgoing price of an ICE vehicle. And well, I mean, let's just back up a step into the class 1 category. So the class 1 cargo van category. So these are cargo vans that, when loaded, weigh less than 6,000 pounds. LDV 130 is a class 1 cargo van. That segment has been basically pretty consistent over the past dozen years. It's sold 62,000 plus vehicles out of 4 different manufacturers for the past dozen years. All 4 of those manufacturers in 2023 decided to pull out of market. So they're not replacing their ICE vehicles with an EV. They're not replacing with an ICE vehicle. Reason for that is that they didn't really make any money on the front end of these vehicles. Their entire business model was based upon the service of these. And when you go to EV, there is no service model. If you've based your business on servicing EVs, you're not going to do a very good job of it, because that's the distinct advantage, is that there is no maintenance cost from a relative perspective. But really, when you get into it, it's the energy cost, the individual energy cost. So if you're thinking about, the cheapest ICE cargo van that exists is the Chevy Express. Okay, that's been around for 25 years. They haven't changed it one iota. It costs you about $40,000. However, that Chevy Express, that when you think about how much gasoline it uses, so just assume that it's got the MPG that's on the sticker. Over 100,000 miles, you're going to use $23,000 worth of gasoline. Whereas by contrast, the LDV 130 is going to cost you 6,300 in energy. So right out of the box, you've already deflated that whole aspect of the acquisition price being the thing. It's TCO that matters. And this is before we even got the maintenance of it, because that Chevy Express over 100,000 miles needs 10 oil changes and 2 transmission services and 2 cooling flushes, plus a catalytic converter got stolen, I'm sure, during that whole time. For us in that same period of time, we've got a cabin air filter, you change the brake fluid one time, and that's about it. So you're looking at an overall TCO of very, very little for us, but extremely high for what seems to be a bargain product, that's on the marketplace.
So that drive, Stephen, we believe strongly, right? Obviously, there's elements and we're customizing and figuring out how to provide, unique solutions to our customers. But at the end of the day, as Will just said, TCPO is that it's the total cost of ownership holistically. And look, let's face it, most of these large commercial fleets are already leasing these vehicles in many respects, right? So they're looking for the best bang for their buck that ultimately drops to the bottom line. Postal Service, different, right? Some of the government entities different because they're not necessarily using large leasing companies. But at the end of the day, that's what's driving, and we think way more than the politics or the sustainability elements of EV.
For sure.
I mean, Will, the picture you're painting is it is so much cheaper for let's say a Class 1 commercial vehicle to operate than ICE. And when you're selling into these folks, that's the main ROI that you're representing.
Well, I mean, those are the obvious ones, but then when you actually look at what Canoo offers from a product perspective, we offer something that's different. I mean, I always like to say, make sure that you go and test everything that's out in the world before you make a purchase, and you will see a definitive difference in our form factor, our quality levels, our fit and finish, and a lot of other aspects to it. So when you can come in with hey, we're going to not only save you a ton of money both on the energy costs and also your maintenance costs, but by the way, it's designed around your workers' ergonomics. The space is the best allocated for cargo density. We've thought about all of the ways of where we can be more efficient in the vehicle and your worker can be more efficient as they utilize the vehicle. I mean, you think about companies that do delivery on the regular basis. I mean, you and I don't normally get in and out of a car 150 times in a day. But when you do that, you really become a person who benchmarks quality. I mean, slam a door 100 times, and I guarantee you know which car has a higher level of quality. And these are the pieces that once you have past the money moment, then you come to the aha moment that I can not only get a premium product that is going to be valuable to my worker and they're going to appreciate it, but it's also going to save me a consistent amount of money year on year.
Yes.
Can you guys talk about the sales cycle? Like, how is the sales cycle different between commercial and government?
Well, it's kind of in the same, but government's a little bit more regimented, as you could probably well guess. Their cycles tend to be a little bit longer. They hold assets for a little bit longer, but they wholly own them. So they have a budget, they buy the product, they keep the product. One of the nice things about working with municipalities such as cities or counties is that hub and spoke scenario. I mean, the county of wherever you live has a depot most likely where all their vehicles concentrate every night, where there's available energy for charging, where they have skilled technicians so that not only we could uptrain their technicians or we could work within their shop. Often their technicians are trained on EVs because they have, electric garbage trucks and other things, buses in their municipal fleet. And they're really looking at fleets and how they can mitigate costs. Now, what's interesting about this is that a lot of them don't do a lot of fleet analytics. They look at basic stuff like where's the car gone and how much fuel has it used, because there aren't the tools out there for them. Now with Canoo, we can obviously pull all of this information off the vehicle and show it to you in a dashboard by a Canoo Hub, which is our online product that comes with the vehicle. And now we can give you insights into the wear and usage of these vehicles. I mean, you typically as a fleet owner don't know which vehicle is hauling bricks and which one is hauling feathers until the brick vehicle wears out and you find out after the fact. So most fleet ownership in the government municipality side is reactive. They have no capabilities or data to proactively manage their fleet. And that's where we come in and show you that, with data, you could be doing a lot before the product even breaks. You could, manage your fleet a lot better. So it's giving them the opportunity to see that the data layer is what, as I said, makes the mechanical layer more usable to the person.
What is the TAM on the Class 1 commercial vehicle market?
I mean, if you look at just what we mentioned, just in that Class 1, consistently, they've been selling 62,000 vehicles a year for the past dozen years, and no one is pushing into that market essentially exclusively to us. So, it's a matter of What does that market, do they want to stay within the class 1 size? And a lot of folks are like, well, they could just go to a class 2 van. Well, they really can't, because in a lot of cases, the folks who have chosen this size vehicle chose it for a reason. That Chevy Express that I just mentioned earlier, once you put a roof rack and some ladders on it, it doesn't fit into a parking garage. So how, if you're if you're a maintenance person in an apartment complex, how do you drive that vehicle? It won't fit through a McDonald's drive-through. I mean, these are conditions and things that people don't think about until your vehicle is now too big for the use case that you plan. So this size is super important, and we fit right into it.
Yeah, and I think when we think of that, I mean, obviously those are US numbers, and we cross over and some of our products into the kind of class 2A space as well. I think of it, Stephen, as it's a roughly 250,000 to 300,000 annualized market, depending on how you want to segment it. That's in the US, right? One thing that we've also learned recently, we had tremendous reception in our entry into the UK, with our I think this, but just for the audience, with our postal service delivery vehicles. We used our steer-by-wire technology, seamlessly moved from left-hand drive to right-hand drive. And we were able to take, kind of that experience and leverage that into going into the UK market, the right-hand drive market as well. And the feedback over there has been pretty staggering, right? In terms of our, the quality of the vehicle, the feedback on, the ability to bring in a US built product versus, in many cases, a Chinese built product over there. And obviously there's a lot more work to do on pilots and configurations and working with the key customers, but thinking about, we've met with probably a large portion of the top 15 fleet customers in the country. And it's been astounding in terms of how they've given reception to us, and they're really excited about, the potential for Canoo in that market. That opens up a lot of other doors. But I think when you think globally around the LDV 130 and 190, it's a perfect fit for a lot of markets. It actually is, in many cases, right, is a little undersized for the US market, because look, let's face it, US corporations have given our infrastructure in the US, they've tended to buy at the largest size. But for BEV, that may not work. Like, that mindset really doesn't work, both on a cost side and on a use case side. You don't want to pay for a bunch of excess battery when that doesn't meet your criteria, but it brings up your vehicle cost pretty dramatically, being the largest line item in your BOM, right? So those things, I think there's a mindset shift that's underway around fleets in general. And you're not going to always see, I think, historically, buy at the top. What we've thought is we've brought our products out in the small size. We can very efficiently scale our platform up, but it's much, much harder and costlier, and oftentimes a complete redesign to scale down. And I think historically on the commercial side, people have started very large, in the US at least, and come down. It's not that easy, and it's actually quite costly. So we have the benefit there of going from small to large, whereas in many cases they're going the other way around.
And is that the advantage of your skateboard platform? I mean, is that one of the one of the ways that you're able to have such flexibility?
The answer is yes, and the fact that because our the MPP1, the skateboard, is very modular, and also given our steer-by-wire technology, it gives a lot of flexibility in the way you can expand that. And effectively, our battery pack, remember, is also modular, so you can add on what I think about as 5 kilowatt hour bricks pretty seamlessly, and again, very cost effectively. Similarly, in certain cases where you don't need the range, right, and your use case is smaller, you could probably be more cost effective and reduce some battery size if you chose to, right? So those are things that flexibility is built into our platform, such that we can be very effective in kind of customizing those. Of course, it's going to be around large fleet orders, but there is an ability to customize to the extent that's desirable, around the customer.
And if I can add on to that, everybody talks about a skateboard-based design, and that's not anything revolutionary, but how we do it is, and as I like to call it, is we make a complete skateboard. So if you go onto the website and take a look at the pictures of the skate cart, which is our skateboard with a roll cage on it, a seat, and a steering wheel. Essentially, that tells you the capabilities of that skateboard itself. It's fully self-contained. Other manufacturers can't do that because they require a body to fit strut tower mounts or things of the like. We've compacted that suspension and made everything in one box. So your battery, propulsion, electronic systems, HVAC is all contained in the skateboard. And then I just need a place to put the steering wheel and the brake pedal. And that can be anywhere in the car because it's all by wire. So if you think about what that gives us the ability, case in point example, everybody would probably be in an airport in the next couple of weeks. Go look out onto the tarmac, and just about everything that's out there, from the baggage handling carousel to the ladder on, the ladder that drives around, could have a Canoo skateboard under it very, very simplistically. And our skateboard doesn't care what the top hat is. It's just a matter of plunking it down, and does it meet our requirements for mass and load? And that also gives us, again, this democratization of the electric vehicle. It gives us other revenue streams of being able to work with those integrations, also being able to manage their service and things of the like. So the skateboard unlocks an awful lot for us.
One of the things I find astounding is your platform is so flexible that you could just add battery modules and increase range. I mean, just, that's incredibly flexible for all different types of customers.
It isn't actually, I mean, you take it one step further, right? And we're doing this right now in the testing with the Department of Defense and the Defense Innovation Unit. Look, that's power is extremely important on the battlefield, right? And you can carry this power on a backpack, right? So you can backpack power in and out. Right now, as Tony as a veteran, talks a lot about it. It's like, look, most of our soldiers that are lost in combat are lost on supply lines and moving around fuel.
Yep.
Right, you can adjust that, and with the ability to be able to bring different types of power onto forward bases and be able to use that in different applications on the military, and that whether it be heat signature, lots of different opportunities there. That's something that they're evaluating with us, and they're evaluating that with some others. We're one of 5 that's in evaluation with the DIU. But that's been one of the benefits, right, of our very flexible, but also very energy rich and dense battery packs that we have using our own system.
And that's also one of the things that we learned by showing at the National Guard Expo last year, as well as AUSA, is that every single one of these new technologies, that's whether it's a battlefield technology or life-saving technology, all uses electricity in some capacity. But there is not an easy way of getting that to the front. Everything is powered by a GPA, generator. So when we had our module battery pack, on display, a lot of folks stopped by and said, "Is this something that could be integrated into my product?" I mean, even guys who had, laser welders and things like that were like, "Hey, I could carry this amount of energy into this."
What about
and now
drones? I mean, the whole
I think
Ukrainian
kinda hit it.
battle
I mean,
was fought by drones.
yeah, if you watched that, it was all drones. And I mean, essentially, where are they getting that energy from? I mean,
Right.
and if you have the ability to carry 50 pounds, and drop off 5 kilowatts worth of energy and pick up another one and bring it back, that's a significant advantage. So.
Greg, as a private equity professional, before you got involved here, how much weight do you guys give the IP of the company? I mean, it seems like you have incredible IP, from drive-by-wire to all this software, et cetera. And I'm just curious, if I take a look at your market cap compared to, it seems to me, incredible value in the IP portfolio, there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think IP is very valuable. At the end of the day, everyone always says, right, the real key is, right, staying ahead in the race. But you have to have the foundational IP, and in this case, I think there's a very practical element of IP around a vehicle, is the fact that we can seamlessly connect all of our components and have them talk to each other without having to go to third parties, without having to wait on third parties. And that's one of the challenges, as we talked about early on, with the existing OEMs have in many respects, and maybe even some of the EV guys, right? So I'm a huge believer on that. Of course, is not that's one of, as I mentioned, one of our pillars, right? It's not the only pillar, but I think it has a tremendous amount of value. But you have to convert that IP ultimately into product and sales, and then stay ahead. So when I've always looked at IP on a standalone basis, it's definitely got kind of the downside protection from an IP, value perspective, but you want to see the company continue to iterate as we have, right, with our partners, also, and much of that internally, and then figure out how to monetize that IP, whether it be through, the democratized components that we have, because it's our drive unit, it's our battery technology, it's our 50-pound bricks of batteries that could be on the front lines of military bases. And all of that feeds into that IP base that we control.
Can you talk about your pilot programs? And I know there's a number, there's a lot of confidentiality around them, but what can you say about, like, what you've learned so far about the pilot programs, and how you can apply those lessons moving forward?
Look, I'll start. Maybe Will can jump in too. Like, we've gone through a number of pilots. The earlier stages of our pilots, with Walmarts and some of our other kind of commercial customers, was to collect feedback, right? Iterate, be able to take that feedback and incorporate it into our kind of Gen 2, now Gen 3 vehicles. So there was obviously a testing phase for, are we meeting their needs? Are there tweaks that need to be made on the vehicles? But the pilot, what people deem as pilots can be different, right? There could be like the loan of a vehicle that's in use for, 45 to 60 days, returned. It could be the purchase for a longer term pilot. And in many cases, customers, they don't need to run a pilot, they just want to buy, right? Because they want to, they want a vehicle that meets their needs, and it's just, let's go. But I think by and large, right, we just finished a pilot in the Middle East with Red Sea Global, and the feedback was tremendous, right? And they had a number of our vehicles over there that were, providing a lot of, people movement, luggage movement, other things on their property. And the feedback was very strong around, hey, this worked. It worked in our environment really well, right? We learned some things at Canoo from that we can tweak in, both software and hardware. And then, obviously over time, that will then convert into a sales agreement and purchases. Now, but that's part of, back to Stephen, your earlier comment around sales cycle, is like, depending on who the partner is, right, that sales cycle can be very different. So it's not a one size fits all, but at the end of the day, it's a chance for us to get feedback. It's a chance for us to demonstrate that our product is phenomenal, and then ultimately convert that into orders and sales down the road. But we'll Phil.
Yeah, and I think from the folks that we work with, I think the number one thing is that we're listening. We're listening to what their real needs are, and we're trying to find solutions for their real problems. And that's not something that happens in the marketplace. Normally, larger manufacturers, they sell a widget, you buy the widget. If you don't like it, that's it. But we actually are assigning an engineer to you so that we can conform the product to your needs, because that's the ultimate goal. But to kind of summarize what we've seen from a feedback from the drivers in general, kind of fits into three categories. So one being ergonomics. If you get in and out of a vehicle a couple hundred times a day, you really notice how the ease of ingress and egress is. In fact, the feedback that we've gotten where we're being compared against taller vehicles, they complain about having to get up, in, and out of a vehicle on the regular. And we've designed and we've done testing for ergonomics around the full swath of the sizing of people. So we're looking at 5% female. That's somebody who's about 4'11" and 108 pounds, all the way to a 95% male, which is 6'2" and 208. So that's a big difference in how your controls work, how far you reach for grab handles, things like that. But all of that's been factored in. And in addition to that, we've taken that same ergonomic approach and we've put it to the cargo area. So the cargo area is far more dense than other folks. Typical cargo van, you put shelves on the side, you walk down the middle, you have to climb in a big dark environment and get your stuff out. What you're wasting is 1/3 of the space down the middle. Whereas we've ergonomically figured out that if you bring the work to the workers with sliding shelves and things of the like, not only can you increase the cargo density inside of the vehicle, but you have less repetitive motion injuries, workers' comp, and things of the like. Then you get into kind of the second pillar, which is the quality of the product itself. I mentioned, they're used to driving the competitive set. They slam a door 100 times, and they slam our door once and realize the solidity of it. I mean, look at our interior cabin. It doesn't have a lot of flourishes to it, but it is complete and it's there with purpose. And that's the whole point. You look at other people's cabins and it's full of painted metal and unfinished things and plastic bits that really don't give you a feeling that you're in a quality product. And if that's your office, wouldn't you want to be given a far more quality product if it costs the same? And kind of the last piece, and this is kind of the piece that really is the sell, is just ease of operation, field of view. I mean, once you get into the vehicle, the moment you see an expansive glass and what you can see out of that, plus the street view window, folks that drive every day, when they see the street view, they immediately get it. They understand why it's there. And that is so that you have this extra bit of safety to be able to see through the front of the car to see what's directly in front of you. And if you think about last mile delivery, often it's unskilled younger folks flying into neighborhoods that maybe aren't so incentivized on safety. But having this little extra bit of safety means it's something to them. Because a lot of folks ask us, why didn't we make it a front? Well, front is wasted space. I mean, right now, I guarantee you in the trunk of your car is something that you've been driving around with for 6 months, spending either gas or energy to drag it around. So why not give an advantage to the end customer? And really the last thing is the drive-by-wire and the super small footprint. I mean, we fit so much on such a small space that you can fit it in everywhere. And with ease of drive-by-wire, steer-by-wire, this is all you ever turn the steering wheel. You never have to go multiple locks in each direction. So just simply pulling a K-turn in the middle of the street is actually a lot easier. Now, envision that you're doing deliveries and you have to go down tight cul-de-sacs and in apartment complexes. I mean, that could mean an awful lot of U-turns, K-turns, and things of the like. So we're making your job easier by giving you these ergonomic advantages.
One thing people don't talk about is the fact that the vehicle's really cool looking. I think so anyway. So Hey, can you talk about delivering vehicles at scale and where you're at? What is it what does the future look like? What it's going to take to get there?
Yeah, I'll start, but I think that when we think about and Tony's vision for, really attacking the commercial and government space was to be able to sell, to large customers. So, you sell a handful that turns into hundreds, turns into hopefully thousands over time. So you get tremendous amount of leverage across your infrastructure on the sales side and ultimately the SMR side as well. Right, because you're able to, have, fewer points of contact. You're not having to deal with all the one-offs, and that provides, huge benefits to the company that ultimately drops to the bottom line. Now, obviously, we are in the stage this year where we have moved into production, but it's been, slower than anticipated for a number of different reasons. We feel that in many respects, that the macro, the last 12 months has been challenged. Right, in the last couple of years. There's been a completely, kind of rethinking of supply chain and the geopolitical environment we're living in. It's daily occurrences where, we're dealing with, dealing with things around China, whether it be a customer concern about China or something internal around China. So we've taken the time this year, and as I think Tony stated on our last earnings calls, to really step back and make sure that we're getting it right. Because there's really not an advantage in a dislocation environment like we're living right now to really rush units out the door and not get it right initially. And so that's one of the benefits that we're taking was, let's make sure, and Tony, I think Tony made the comment actually on this, Stephen, the fireside chat in March. Look, the best CEOs are those with patience. Right, making sure that we are doing it methodically, operationalizing it ahead of time.
By the way, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA says that all the time. I mean, that is his mantra. It's funny.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, I think that's, and look at where their company has gone over the last couple of years. So I think that, at the end of the day, right, there's going to continue to be lots of twists and turns in this space. Mobility is changing. We all know that, right? And there are going to be other challenges, right, around whether it be infrastructure or other things, but we want to make sure we tackle those head on with as much information as possible, as much insight as possible with our customers, and make sure, I think as Will was saying, make sure that we are addressing their actual problem. And in many cases, not only addressing it at the vehicle, but addressing it in some other points of their overall kind of value proposition. So we spend a lot of time thinking about customer value prop, and ultimately, how do we integrate ourselves very deeply into any organization. And that could be customized software, it could be, various customized upfitting, it could be other components that we develop for that customer, et cetera, et cetera. So, but at scale, right, you have to step into scale, and you have to step into it the right way, because if you sprint before you walk, right, you fall down. And and that's something that and look, it's also been a tricky environment, right? I mean, we want to make sure that we're getting the supply chain. We're having those dialogues with our suppliers and adjusting things in advance, because it's not good for us and it's not good for them at the end of the day, and not good for our customers if we don't get this right initially. You saw the recall news this morning. Again, you rush, it creates all sorts of other challenges that, if you're simply trying to count vehicles going out the door and you're doing it the wrong way, you're going to fall down. And we've seen it happen time and time again here in the last 24 months. So we know that we're set up to be able to scale, but we're going to do it very judiciously, and we're going to do it methodically. And inevitably, it's not going to go according to plan. I mean, look, everybody's plan, it's as good as the piece of paper that's written on it. But at the end of the day, right, you want to make sure you do it, and you do it in the most efficient and profitable manner. And if that takes a little longer, it takes a little longer.
Great. There are a ton of audience questions, so I'm going to let Callie take it away and hear what the audience has to say.
Great.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. And yeah, there are many questions again about production. Can you just talk about perhaps some of your supply chain challenges, and where do you see yourself in 2025?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that I just touched on some of the supply chain, supply chain challenges. you know, like I think that we have been judicious with capital and making sure that we're allocating capital to the areas with most efficiency. And we've touched on this multiple times in our last earnings calls around, you know, being able to divert capital to buy, you know, equipment that's going to be ultimately able to increase automation, increase profitability over time. That doesn't happen overnight, right? All of those, many of those products that we purchased are now landed in OKC and are being installed. So that's all part of the overall supply and production process. We have not given guidance around 2025. I think it's premature to do that. That'll come later this year. And we need to see where we end up at the end of this year and where we are specifically on supply chain to be able to inform us for the 2025 and guidance. So I'm going to kind of leave the 2025 figure at that, and we can jump to the next.
Great. With battery technology rapidly changing and improving, how can Canoo continue to ensure that it's able to continually adapt its vehicles as that battery technology advances?
I think the way and we're not the right people to answer this in detail, but kind of high level, the answer is, look, we have our own design, right? We talked about the democratized battery system that's made up of 16 5 kilowatt hour packs. That's our 80 kilowatt hour battery that goes into the vehicle. Obviously, we can sell those on a per piece unit or on an entire vehicle. We can downsize, upsize as we discussed. We are not at this stage looking at really spending a ton of time on different chemistries, but our system is flexible such that it can integrate new chemistries over time. So such that if there becomes a different standard, we're using Panasonic 2170 cylindrical cells. If there becomes a new standard, we will integrate that into our battery system at that time. So there is flexibility similar to the way I think about ADAS. Our hardware is designed to be able to take, you know, AV technology up to say 4.5, which would be all fully autonomous in terms of a pure hardware perspective. Obviously, regulatory software and other things have to catch up with that for it to make sense from a commercial vehicle standpoint. We're not, you know, that's not one of our primary focuses right now because our customers are not, you know, in need of that. But over time, right, as things evolve, our vehicles have the ability to scale up and be customized to increase, you know, that autonomy as regulatory and the software and the environment allow.
Thank you. Can you elaborate a little bit more on your relationship with the United States Postal Service?
You want to go for that one?
I mean, you know, obviously what's been said public is pretty much what we can speak about. I don't think that we can go into really too much more depth about that. I mean, the fun part about the internet is the internet does a lot of sleuthing for you. So you can kind of see some direct reactions of what's happening within the marketplace. Much the same as that the USPS does a pretty good job of posting what their intentions are. So that I think you can back into, you know, where we sit with them.
Yeah, and I look, I think the goal with the Postal Service is also rethinking their business. And they want to be more competitive. They have obviously very old and outdated vehicles that cost a tremendous amount of money for them to maintain. They've made a really public push into EV and infrastructure, and we're seeing that, right? Our vehicles are on the ground delivering mail every day out of Atlanta. We get all, you know, we see the data, we see the number of miles they run, and that's, you know, important, right? Because they're being used, right? They're being used, and that feedback ultimately bubbles its way up and positions us for some sort of hopefully incremental opportunity with them.
Yeah,
you know,
and I think
going
that
later this year.
You outlined, if you take a look at the USPS's 10-year plan, and look at the tenets of that 10-year plan and then align them with what our capabilities are and the tenets of our company, there's an almost direct overlap. So almost everything that they're intending to do, which is launching USPS Connect, which is a rival to UPS and FedEx with pickup and drop off packages, there's a lot of dynamics that have to happen for those to work. And right now, you know, USPS does the same thing every day quite well, and they visit everyone in America. You can imagine that they're going to need a lot more data associated to that to make that more efficient. When we talked about the cost savings associated to just the physical operation of the vehicle, you can look at the published costs of how much they're spending to maintain their vehicles. I mean, in LLV, they're spending $5,000 per vehicle, and they have over 105,000 of those. So think about the sunk costs there. The Metris, which is the only other right-hand drive vehicle, they buy a COTS, so a commercial off-the-shelf product. They have 30,000 of those, and that gets, by their measure, 6.8 miles per gallon. So, just start doing the math and you can see where immediate savings by electrification are going to happen. But then the differentiator is what we can offer from a technology perspective.
Can you also talk, I think it's also really important, just for the audience, that's like size the fleet, right-hand drive versus left-hand drive, and who else can compete?
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good point. So, top line, they have about 205,000 vehicles they use for delivery. They manage 215,000 individual routes, of which they're basically driving to 170 some odd thousand of those. The predominant of their vehicles is right-hand drive. I mean, the LLV, they have 105,000 right-hand drive LLVs, which is that 20-year-old, Grumman thing that they have. And then they have 30,000-ish Metrises, which is right-hand drive as well. Then they're looking for a replacement for that because they have to do curbside delivery. Now, they've obviously contracted with Oshkosh for that one piece of it, but there's still an awful lot of their fleet that they've not announced how they're going to replace. And who else makes right-hand drive vehicles? Well, in America, there's no one else, quite honestly. And if you look at the other products that they use, such as Ford E-Transits and Ram ProMasters, those are very tall vehicles. And even if they had a right-hand drive version, which they do in some other markets, you can't deliver mail out of it because it's too tall for mailboxes. So they have twofold problem, not only moving the steering wheel to the other side, but actually keeping it at a height where now you can deliver mail out of it. Again, thinking about the form factor of people who are, 4'11" all the way to 6'2", and doing that hundreds of times a day. So.
Yeah, we think it's a really exciting opportunity. I mean, obviously, you can tell the way we're talking about it. But I think it also just fits perfectly into our plan and our product, and ultimately, look, again, we're trying to bring two things: value to our customers, and ultimately sustainability, right? We all believe in sustainability. It's not the only driver, but it's an ancillary driver on a lot of these purchases. So it starts with the value proposition.
Great. Greg, can you speak about the cap structure of the stock? Are there convertibles and ATM in place, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, our capital structure today is pretty straightforward. It's pretty much all equity. We have a prepaid advance agreement that's been in place with Yorkville Advisors that we've used a number of times in the last, really probably 2 years. It's similar to an ATM, so similar concept. Separately, we have an ATM available as well. And so but that's very simplistically, the way our capital structure is organized. We have in this environment where, in the rising rate environment that we lived in, the fact that, many earlier stage companies that come under fire, and obviously small caps got hurt pretty bad. We think our stock has not performed well, but has continued to provide access for capital for the company. So that's been important, and it's something we're constantly balancing and looking for other forms of capital. And as I stated, I don't know where we are. We're about roughly $700 million of equity capital raised, or equity linked capital raised in the last, roughly 9 to 10 quarters. So very meaningful continued access. But look, of course, we'd rather be able to raise more, but we're always sensitive to raising too much capital at these fairly low prices. So it's something that's a constant balancing act, a constant conversation that we're having internally. And we, look, at the end of the day, we've been, as Tony said, very milestone based. So as we're accomplishing goals, we go back and raise more capital. And the capital allocation exercise here is not an easy one, but we are allocating as best we can to the maximize value for ultimately shareholders. And that will happen, we believe, over time, right? Given, I think, Stephen's earlier comment around the IP portfolio, the opportunity here, the fact that we don't have much competition. I know people are not necessarily pleased with how the stock has performed of late. However, look, stocks can be volatile, and we all know that there's a long road ahead, right? For Canoo and for the EVs, the EV category in general.
Great. And staying on the financial aspect, and for one more question, and then we have to wrap it up. Can you tell us about non-dilutive funding?
Look, I mean, we're always looking at non-dilutive opportunities. We've had our hat in the ring on a number of government programs. We successfully executed on one non-dilutive opportunity. More recently, it was somewhat small, but nevertheless, kind of, I think, is evidence that there are ways to monetize various types of government opportunities. I think we are continuing to pursue as many of those opportunities as possible. We received some funding from the state of Oklahoma earlier this year. It was small, but albeit still non-dilutive. And remember, again, a lot of those non-dilutive opportunities are related to, progressing the business. So they all kind of go hand in hand as you ramp the business up, as we, employ more workforce in the state of Oklahoma, as we are able to tap different sources of funding, those funds will flow. But it's not, again, it's one of many, many angles that we're constantly pursuing in terms of trying to raise that and continue to be able to ramp the business.
Great. Well, that concludes the webinar. Just before we close out, Greg and William, I just want to put it back over to you for any final comments, and then we will say goodbye.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kelly and Stephen, for hosting us here, and thanks to all the Force family team. Look, we're very excited about the opportunity around Canoo. I know that you've heard that in this hour or 45 minutes to an hour we've been on the phone or on the line. We think there are great things ahead, and appreciate you guys being interested in what we have to say, and very interested in supporters of the company. The ticker is GOEV, GOEV. And for those of you that may be newer to the story, and look, we look forward to continuing to share our progress throughout the rest of this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Great
Thank you,
job, guys. Thank you so much.
See you later. Bye-bye.